Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
And then suddenly wondered where part of your money disappeared? If that question has ever crossed your mind, or if you have ever felt tired, confused, or even ready to give up learning English because life seemed too complicated, then stay with me until the end of the story. Today I want to share something deeply personal. It is not only about money. It is about love, family, culture, hope, and the unexpected lesson hidden inside my very first paycheck in the United States. This single piece of paper changed the way I looked at work, relationships, and even the English language itself. And believe it or not, the biggest surprise was not the amount of money I earned. It was what disappeared before I even touched it. My name is Daniel, and a few years ago, I landed in America with one suitcase, a backpack, and a head full of dreams. Like many newcomers, I believed that if I worked hard enough, everything would become easier. I imagined wide roads, friendly neighbors, tall buildings, and endless opportunities. Some of those dreams became real. Others were far more complicated than I expected. When I first arrived, everything felt different. The air smelled different. The weather changed quickly. People smiled at strangers. They held doors open for each other. They stood in neat lines without anyone telling them to do so. Even simple greetings sounded warm. Good morning. How's your day going? Take care. These short English sentences became part of my daily life. At first, I could understand only half of what people were saying. Sometimes I answered the wrong question. Sometimes I simply smiled because I had no idea what to say. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I started treating every conversation like a free English lesson. Every coffee shop became a classroom. Every grocery store became a listening exercise. Every bus ride became speaking practice. Little by little, English stopped feeling like a difficult school subject. It slowly became part of my real life. Finding my first job was not easy. I sent applications everywhere. Restaurants, warehouses, grocery stores, delivery companies, hotels. Some employers never replied. Some interviews lasted only a few minutes. Sometimes I walked home wondering if my English would ever be good enough. Research in language learning often shows that consistent exposure and meaningful daily conversations help adults build listening and speaking skills more effectively than memorizing long vocabulary lists. That idea gave me hope. I realized I did not need perfect English. I only needed the courage to keep using it every single day. Finally, one manager looked at me, smiled, and said something I will never forget. You can start Monday. Those 4 simple words sounded like music. My first week was exhausting. I woke up before sunrise. I packed my lunch. I checked the weather again and again because American mornings could be freezing while afternoons felt warm. My feet hurt. My back hurt. Sometimes I counted the hours until I could finally go home. Still, every evening I told myself the same thing. This is only the beginning. The people around me came from many countries. Mexico, India,
Vietnam, Niger,
the Philippines,
Brazil.
We all spoke English with different accents. Nobody sounded exactly alike, yet somehow everyone understood each other. That surprised me. Back home, I believed English had to sound perfect. America taught me something different. Communication mattered more than perfection. That lesson made me less afraid to speak. Every mistake became another step forward instead of another reason to quit. Then payday finally arrived. Everyone around me seemed excited. Some coworkers were already talking about weekend plans. Others joked about buying new shoes or taking their families out for dinner. I felt the same excitement. I remembered calculating my expected income over and over again. In my notebook, the number looked wonderful. I even imagined sending money back to my parents and saving enough for a better apartment someday. The paycheck was handed to me on a quiet Friday afternoon. I held it carefully. For a moment, I simply looked at my name printed on the paper. It felt real. It felt like proof that I had survived the hardest first weeks in a completely new country. I smiled. Then I looked closer. The smile slowly disappeared. The number I actually received was much smaller than the number I had expected. I blinked. I checked it again. Then again. My eyes moved down the page. Federal tax, state tax, Social Security, Medicare, other deductions. Each line seemed to quietly whisper the same question. Did you know we were here? Honestly, I didn't. I stood there for several seconds without saying a word. I wasn't angry. I wasn't disappointed. I was simply confused. Where had my money gone? Was this a mistake? Did everyone lose this much? Or was I the only one who didn't understand how America really worked? At that exact moment, but also about gratitude, responsibility, love, and the beautiful family I had not even met yet. The weekend arrived, but my mind stayed with that paycheck. I placed it on the small kitchen table in my tiny apartment and looked at it again while drinking a cup of cheap instant coffee. Outside the window, cars passed one after another. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children laughing in a nearby park. America looked peaceful that afternoon, but inside my head there was one question that refused to leave. Why did my paycheck look so different from the number I had calculated before starting the job? I took out my notebook, wrote down every number, and tried to solve the mystery. Gross pay, net pay, federal tax, state tax, Social Security, Medicare. I had worked every hour on that paycheck, yet I did not fully understand the language printed on it. That was the moment I realized something important. Learning English was not only about speaking with coworkers or ordering food at a restaurant. It was also about understanding real life. Every receipt, every bill, every work schedule, every bank statement, and every paycheck was teaching me English in a way no classroom ever had. Instead of feeling frustrated, I became curious. Curiosity is powerful. Psychologists often explain that people remember information much better when they connect it to a real emotional experience. That made perfect sense to me. I would probably forget a random vocabulary list after a few days, but I would never forget the words printed on my first paycheck because they were connected to one unforgettable feeling. Confusion.
Surprise. Hope.
Determination. So I opened my laptop and started reading simple articles about taxes in the United States. I watched beginner-friendly English videos. I paused every few seconds, repeated new words aloud, and practiced reading each sentence slowly. Gross pay.
Pause.
Net pay.
Pause.
Tax deduction.
Pause.
Take-home pay. Little by little, these unfamiliar expressions stopped looking scary. They became part of my everyday vocabulary. That evening I made a promise to myself. Every day I would learn just 5 useful English words from real life. Not 50 words from a dictionary. Just 5 words that I could actually use tomorrow. It sounded almost too simple, but those tiny steps slowly changed everything. The following Monday, I gathered enough courage to ask one of my coworkers about my paycheck. His name was Michael. He had worked there for several years and always greeted everyone with a relaxed smile. I held the paycheck in my hand and laughed nervously. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course," he answered. "Did they forget to pay me?" He looked at the paper for only a few seconds before smiling. "No," he said kindly. "Welcome to America." We both laughed. Then he patiently explained every deduction one by one in slow, simple English. He never made me feel embarrassed. Instead, he told me that almost every new employee asks the same question after receiving a first paycheck. Suddenly, I felt much better. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't stupid. I was simply learning something new. That conversation lasted less than 10 minutes, but it became one of the most valuable English lessons I had ever received. Looking back now, I think those ordinary conversations were the reason my English improved much faster than I expected. Every genuine discussion created new vocabulary that stayed in my memory because it mattered. Language experts often describe this as learning through meaningful context, and I experienced it firsthand without even realizing it. After work, I walked home instead of taking the bus. The autumn air was cool, and colorful leaves covered the sidewalks. Red, orange, yellow, and gold danced across the streets whenever the wind blew. I had never seen autumn quite like this before. Back home, the seasons felt different. America was slowly teaching me that even nature could speak a different language. As I walked, I noticed couples holding hands, families walking their dogs, parents pushing strollers, and neighbors waving to each other across their front yards. Something about those ordinary moments made me smile. I still knew almost nobody in this new country, but for the first time, I stopped feeling like a visitor. I started feeling like I belonged here, even if only a little. I had a job. I was improving my English every day. I understood my paycheck a little better than I had 3 days earlier. Small victories may seem unimportant, but they quietly build confidence one brick at a time. That evening I taped my first paycheck inside my notebook instead of throwing it away. I wrote one sentence underneath it in careful handwriting. Every deduction teaches me something. Every challenge makes me stronger. At the time, I thought it was only a motivational quote. I had no idea that months later, because of this very job, this paycheck, and this decision to keep learning instead of giving up, I would meet the woman who would completely change my life. That unexpected meeting would begin with just one simple English sentence. And neither of us could imagine where those few ordinary words would eventually lead. Learning my new life. Have you ever noticed that a country can begin teaching you long before anyone actually becomes your teacher? That was exactly what happened to me. I thought my first lesson in America would come from my manager or a language class. I was wrong. My real teacher was everyday life. Every street corner, every supermarket, every smiling stranger, every cold morning, and every simple conversation quietly became part of my English journey. Looking back now, I realized something surprising. The paycheck I received changed the way I understood money, but the days that followed completely changed the way I understood America. The Monday after receiving my first paycheck felt different. I woke up before my alarm. The apartment was still dark. Outside, the sky slowly turned from black to soft blue. The neighborhood was peaceful except for the distant sound of delivery trucks beginning another busy day. I poured myself another cup of coffee and looked out the small kitchen window. Back home, mornings had always felt familiar. Here, every sunrise reminded me that I was still learning how to live in a completely different world. The weather surprised me almost every day. Some mornings were so cold that my hands became numb while walking to work. By afternoon, I wanted to take my jacket off because the sun suddenly felt warm. One coworker laughed and said, "Welcome to American weather." He wasn't joking. I quickly learned that checking the weather forecast every morning was almost as important as brushing my teeth. That simple daily habit also improved my English.
Sunny,
Cloudy, windy, chance of rain,
high, low,
temperature, forecast. Without realizing it, I was building vocabulary that I actually used every single day. Researchers often explain that language learned through repetition in real situations stays in long-term memory much better than isolated. Memorization. I didn't know the scientific term back then. I simply knew that real life was becoming my classroom. My workplace was full of different voices. Some people spoke quickly. Others spoke slowly. Some had strong Southern accents. Others came from New York, California, Texas, or countries all over the world. At first, I thought everyone in America sounded the same. I couldn't have been more wrong. Every accent felt like another puzzle. Sometimes I understood everything. Sometimes I understood almost nothing. Instead of feeling discouraged, I turned it into a game. Every day I challenged myself to learn one new sentence from a coworker. Sometimes it was as simple as, "Could you give me a hand?"
Or,
"Take your time."
or, "No worries."
These were not sentences from a textbook. They were sentences people actually used. That made them much easier to remember. Little by little, my ears became stronger. I stopped translating every word into my native language. Instead, I started understanding ideas. That small change made listening much easier. One afternoon during lunch break, everyone gathered around a small table in the break room.
People talked about football,
Weekend barbecues, road trips, families, children, favorite restaurants. I didn't speak very much. I mostly listened. Listening became my secret weapon. Many language experts agree that beginners often improve faster when they spend more time listening before trying to speak perfectly. That advice matched my experience perfectly. Every conversation added another small piece to the puzzle. Then something interesting happened. One of my coworkers suddenly asked, "So, what do you usually do after work?" Normally, I would have answered with only 2 or 3 words. But this time, I tried something different. I usually walk home because I want to practice English. The room became quiet. Then, everyone smiled. One woman said, "That's actually a really smart idea." Another coworker nodded. "You'll learn much faster that way." Their encouragement gave me confidence I didn't know I needed. Confidence is a funny thing. It doesn't arrive all at once. It grows quietly through tiny victories. One successful conversation. One understood sentence. One brave question. Then another.
and another.
Soon I noticed something else about American culture. People often smiled at strangers. Cashiers asked how your day was going. Neighbors waved even if they barely knew your name. At first, I thought these greetings were invitations to long conversations. So I answered every question honestly. When someone asked, "How are you?" I sometimes explained my entire day. People smiled politely, but I could tell they weren't expecting such a detailed answer. Eventually I learned that "How are you?" often simply meant hello. That tiny cultural lesson saved me from many awkward conversations. It also made me laugh at myself. Making mistakes stopped feeling embarrassing. Instead, they became funny stories. Every mistake taught me something. Every misunderstanding became another English lesson. After work, I often stopped by a nearby grocery store. Not because I needed many things. Because I needed English. I carefully read every label. Milk,
Bread, eggs,
fresh vegetables, frozen food, laundry detergent, paper towels. The store became another classroom. Sometimes I quietly repeated words under my breath while pushing the shopping cart. Nobody noticed. Or if they did, nobody cared. America taught me another valuable lesson. Most people were too busy living their own lives to judge mine. That realization removed a huge amount of fear. The more relaxed I became, the better my English sounded. Psychologists often describe this relationship between reduced anxiety and improved learning performance. I simply experienced it firsthand. One evening, while walking home under a sky painted with orange and purple clouds, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't counting grammar mistakes anymore. I wasn't afraid of every conversation. I wasn't trying to sound perfect. I was simply communicating. And somehow, that was enough. Without realizing it, America had already begun changing me from the inside. Not through dramatic moments, not through huge successes, but through hundreds of tiny conversations that slowly built a new version of myself. I still had no idea that another ordinary day at work was about to introduce me to someone whose smile would stop me in my tracks. The conversation would begin with only 6 simple English words. Yet those 6 words would quietly become the beginning of the greatest love story of my life. A kind stranger. Have you ever met someone who changed your entire future without even trying? Not because they gave you a job, lent you money, or rescued you from a difficult situation. Simply because they smiled at the right moment and said a few ordinary words. Looking back now, I can honestly say that the biggest turning point in my American life did not happen on payday or on my first day at work. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when I almost decided to skip my break. If I had worked 10 more minutes that day, my entire story might have been completely different. The morning began like every other workday. My alarm rang before sunrise. I made coffee. I checked the weather. I packed a simple lunch. By then, these routines had become part of my new American life. Little habits gave me confidence. They reminded me that I belonged here. Work was busy that week. Boxes arrived faster than we could organize them. Customers came in one after another. Everyone moved quickly. Around noon, my manager looked at me and smiled. Go take your lunch break. Normally, I waited another few minutes. That day, something told me not to. I grabbed my lunch and walked outside. The weather was beautiful. A cool breeze carried the smell of fresh grass and coffee from a small cafe across the street. The park next to our building was quiet. Only a few people sat on the benches. Some were reading. Some were eating lunch. Others were simply enjoying the sunshine. I found an empty bench under a large maple tree. As I opened my lunchbox, I noticed someone sitting alone a few benches away. She was reading a book. Every few minutes she looked up, smiled at people walking by, then returned to her book. There was nothing unusual about her, at least not at first. Then something unexpected happened. A sudden gust of wind blew several loose papers out of her notebook. The pages floated across the grass like white birds. Without thinking, I stood up and ran after them. One page landed near a tree. Another slid across the sidewalk. A third almost reached the street before I caught it. When I returned the papers, she laughed. Thank you so much. Her voice was calm and warm. I smiled. You're welcome. That could have been the end of the story. Instead, she looked at my lunchbox and asked, Is that homemade? Such a simple question. But suddenly my English disappeared. My brain knew the answer. My mouth forgot how to say it. After a few awkward seconds, I managed to smile. Yes. I cooked it last night. She laughed softly. It looks much better than mine. She held up a sandwich from a nearby grocery store. We both laughed. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It felt easy, natural. She introduced herself. My name is Emily. I'm Daniel. For a moment, we simply talked. Not about anything important. The weather.
Our jobs.
The neighborhood. Favorite coffee. The park. The conversation was surprisingly slow. She spoke clearly. She never interrupted. Whenever I searched for a word, she patiently waited. That simple kindness made all the difference. Many studies in communication psychology suggest that people learn languages more effectively when they feel emotionally safe during conversations. I didn't know the research then. I only knew one thing. For the first time since arriving in America, I wasn't afraid of making mistakes. Every sentence became easier. Every minute made me more relaxed. Then Emily asked something unexpected. So, Where are you originally from? I told her about my home country, my family, why I came to America, my first paycheck, even the confusing tax deductions. She laughed. My first paycheck confused me too.
I zette her.
You were born here. I know, she said. But nobody teaches you these things until they actually happen. We both laughed again. In that moment, I realized something important. Some experiences are universal. No matter where you come from, everyone has a first paycheck. Everyone feels nervous starting a new job. Everyone worries about the future. Everyone hopes they're making the right decision. That realization made America feel much smaller. Not because the country changed, because the distance between people suddenly felt shorter. Our lunch breaks became a quiet tradition. Not every day, but often enough. Sometimes we talked for 10 minutes. Sometimes only 5. Sometimes we simply smiled and waved from across the park. Oddly enough, those tiny conversations improved my English faster than hours of studying alone. Emily rarely corrected me directly. Instead, she naturally repeated my sentences with correct grammar, without embarrassment, without making me feel like a student. Language experts call this gentle correction through natural conversation an effective way to build fluency. For me, it simply felt like talking to a friend. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. I began looking forward to lunch more than I looked forward to going home. Not because of the food. Because I knew there was a chance I might see Emily sitting beneath that same maple tree. Sometimes she brought a novel. Sometimes a notebook. Sometimes nothing at all. She once admitted she liked sitting outside because it helped her slow down after stressful mornings. I smiled. So do I. One afternoon she looked at me and asked, "Can I tell you something funny?"
Sure.
When we first met, she laughed. "I thought you were going to keep my papers." I burst out laughing. "I thought you were going to think my English was terrible." She shook her head immediately. "Not even once." Those 4 words stayed with me long after that conversation ended. Not even once. Sometimes we become our own biggest critic. We notice every mistake, every pause, every imperfect sentence. Meanwhile, other people are simply listening to what we're trying to say. That realization changed the way I spoke English forever. I became less focused on perfection, more focused on connection. Without realizing it, friendship was quietly growing between us. Neither of us tried to force it. Neither of us expected anything. Life simply kept bringing us back to the same park, the same bench, the same lunchtime, the same easy conversations. Looking back now, I can smile because I know something that the younger version of me could never have imagined. The woman who once thanked me for chasing a few loose papers across the grass would soon become the person who completely changed my understanding of love, family, and what it truly means to build a life together in America. Love through simple English. Sometimes the strongest relationships begin so quietly that you don't even realize your life is changing until one ordinary day suddenly feels impossible to imagine without that person. After meeting Emily in the park a few times, our conversations became part of my weekly routine. We never planned them. We never sent messages asking, "Will you be there today?" Somehow, our lunch breaks simply found each other. If she arrived first, she saved the bench beneath the maple tree. If I arrived first, I did the same. That little wooden bench slowly became my favorite place in America. It wasn't because of the view. It wasn't because of the weather. It was because every conversation there helped me become a little more confident, not only in English but also in myself. Emily had a calm way of speaking. She never rushed. She chose simple words. She smiled while listening instead of waiting for her turn to talk. That made every conversation feel safe. One afternoon she asked, "What's the hardest part about living in the United States?" I thought for a moment. "The language," I answered. Then I laughed.
No.
"Maybe not." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I think the hardest part is believing I belong here." She stayed quiet for a few seconds before answering. "I think everyone feels that way sometimes." Her answer surprised me. She had grown up in America. She spoke perfect English. She had friends, family, and a stable job. Yet she still understood the feeling of not being enough. That conversation taught me something I still remember today. Confidence is not something people are born with. It grows through acceptance, encouragement, and repeated small successes. Psychologists often describe this as self-efficacy, the belief that you can handle challenges because you've overcome them before. Looking back, every simple conversation with Emily quietly strengthened that belief inside me. One Friday afternoon, she smiled and asked, "Do you like coffee?" I laughed. "I drink too much coffee." "Good," she said. "There's a little cafe nearby. We should go after work someday." My heart skipped a beat. Was this a date? Or was it simply two friends having coffee? I had no idea. So I answered with the safest word in English.
Sure.
That evening I arrived 10 minutes early, then 15. I changed my shirt twice before leaving my apartment. I even practiced simple English sentences while walking to the cafe. "How was your day?" "That sounds interesting. I've never tried that before." Looking back now, it seems funny. I wasn't worried about ordering coffee. I was worried about keeping the conversation alive. Emily arrived exactly on time. She noticed my nervous smile almost immediately. "Relax," she laughed. "It's just coffee." Those 3 words somehow made everything easier. The cafe was warm and welcoming. Soft music played in the background. People worked quietly on laptops. Others talked with friends. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room. It felt peaceful. We talked for nearly 2 hours.
Not because we planned to.
Because neither of us noticed the time passing. She asked about my childhood. I asked about hers. She told me about family camping trips. I shared stories about festivals in my home country. We laughed while comparing foods. She couldn't believe how spicy some of my favorite dishes were. I couldn't believe Americans put ice in almost every drink. Our differences became conversations instead of problems. That evening changed something. Until then, English had mostly been a tool. A way to communicate. A way to survive. A way to work. For the first time, English became something more. It became the language of friendship. The language of laughter. The language of memories. Language researchers often explain that emotional experiences strengthen memory formation. That's why people tend to remember conversations connected to happiness far better than vocabulary learned from flashcards. Without realizing it, I was experiencing exactly that. Over the next few weeks, we explored more of the city together. A farmer's market on Saturday morning. A local bookstore. A riverside walking trail. A free outdoor concert. Everything felt new. Not because the places were extraordinary, because I was seeing America through someone else's eyes. Emily loved explaining little cultural traditions. Why neighbors decorated their homes for every holiday. Why people lined up early for Black Friday. Why Thanksgiving meant so much to so many families. In return, I shared traditions from my own culture. Family meals. New Year celebrations. Childhood games. Recipes passed down through generations. Neither of us tried to prove whose culture was better. We were simply curious. That curiosity made every conversation richer. One evening, while walking along the river, I accidentally used the wrong English word. Instead of saying I was embarrassed, I said I was pregnant. The silence lasted exactly 1 second. Then Emily burst into laughter. She laughed so hard she had to stop walking. I looked confused until I realized my mistake. Soon I was laughing too. For weeks afterward, whenever one of us made a funny mistake, she would grin and say, "At least nobody got pregnant this time." That private joke became one of our favorite memories. Oddly enough, that embarrassing mistake made me less afraid of speaking English. I realized that laughter wasn't the enemy of learning. Sometimes it was the best teacher. From that day forward, I stopped chasing perfection. I started chasing connection. People rarely remember flawless grammar. They remember kindness, honesty, humor, and how someone made them feel. As autumn slowly turned into winter, the maple tree in the park lost every leaf. The bench where we first met looked different. The air became colder. Sometimes feelings grow quietly, hidden inside ordinary moments that don't seem important until years later. I didn't know exactly where our friendship was leading. I only knew that every morning I looked forward to seeing her smile a little more than the day before. And deep inside, I had the feeling that the next chapter of my American journey would no longer be mine alone. Taxes teach gratitude. Money has an interesting way of revealing what truly matters. At first, I believed my paycheck was simply a number. The bigger the number, the happier I would be. But America had a different lesson waiting for me. The amount printed on the check was only one part of the story. The lines underneath it, the taxes, deductions, and contributions I once disliked, would slowly teach me something far more valuable than basic financial literacy. They would teach me gratitude, responsibility, and the quiet confidence that comes from understanding how a society works. Winter arrived earlier than I expected. The mornings became darker. Sometimes I left for work before sunrise and returned home after sunset. The cold air made every breath visible. Even after several months, I still smiled whenever I saw snow resting on rooftops. Emily laughed the first time she caught me taking pictures of a parking lot covered in snow. "You know," she said, "most Americans complain about winter." "I know," I answered, "but this is still new to me." She smiled. "I hope you never lose that feeling." Neither did I. By then, work had become familiar. I knew my responsibilities. I understood my coworkers. I could joke in English without translating every sentence in my head. Small victories kept appearing almost every week. One Friday afternoon, payday arrived again. This time, I opened my paycheck with much less fear. Instead of staring at the deductions in confusion, I actually understood what each line meant. Federal income tax, state income tax, Social Security, Medicare, retirement contribution, health insurance. Months earlier, those words had looked like a foreign language. Now they felt like part of everyday life. I wasn't excited about seeing money deducted from my earnings. No one is. But I finally understood why those numbers were there. That simple understanding completely changed my attitude. During lunch, I mentioned it to Michael. "I don't get upset when I see deductions anymore." He smiled. "What changed?" "I finally know what they mean." He nodded. Knowledge usually replaces fear. That sentence stayed with me. Knowledge replaces fear. Not only with money, with language, with relationships, with life itself. Many psychologists explain that uncertainty often creates more stress than reality itself. When people understand how something works, their anxiety usually decreases, even if the situation itself has not changed. Looking back, that described my experience perfectly. The paycheck hadn't changed very much. I had changed. Emily noticed the difference too. I stopped fighting things I didn't understand. She looked at me for a moment. "I think that's one of the biggest signs you're starting to feel at home." Those words touched me more deeply than she probably realized. Home. For months, I had thought of home as a place far away. The country where I was born. The language I grew up speaking. The family who still lived thousands of miles away. Now, the meaning of home was quietly changing. Home was becoming the place where my daily life happened. The place where I worked. The place where I laughed. The place where someone waited to hear about my day. One Saturday morning, Emily suggested we create a monthly budget together. I laughed nervously. I've never made a real budget. She smiled. Most people don't, until they have to. We spread papers across our kitchen table. Rent, utilities, groceries, transportation, savings, emergency fund, entertainment. For the first time, I saw how every dollar had a purpose. Before moving to America, I mostly thought about earning money. Now I was learning how to manage it. That lesson felt just as important. Financial experts often explain that budgeting reduces stress because it transforms uncertainty into a clear plan. I didn't need a research paper to convince me. I could already feel the difference. Instead of wondering where my money disappeared every month, I knew exactly where it was going. Something else surprised me. Creating a budget together didn't feel boring. It felt like teamwork. We celebrated small victories. We spent less eating out this month. We saved a little more. We're getting closer to our goal. Little by little, the future stopped feeling mysterious. It started feeling possible. A few weeks later, Emily invited me to meet her parents for dinner. Suddenly, speaking English at work no longer seemed like the hardest challenge. Meeting your girlfriend's parents is stressful in any language. I practiced polite expressions during the entire drive. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting me. The food is delicious. Emily noticed. You've practiced those sentences, haven't you? I smiled. Maybe. She laughed. They're going to like you. I wasn't so sure. Her parents welcomed me with warm smiles. Her father shook my hand firmly. Her mother gave me a hug before I even knew what was happening. Dinner was simple. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables, apple pie. Nothing fancy. Yet it became one of the most meaningful evenings of my life. They asked about my family, my childhood,
My job.
my dreams. Whenever I searched for the right English word, nobody rushed me. Nobody finished my sentences. They simply listened. That simple patience reminded me of Emily. I finally understood where she had learned it. On the drive home, I quietly looked out the window. What are you thinking? Emily asked. I paused. I think today was the first time America felt like family. She reached over and gently held my hand. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Sometimes silence says everything words cannot. Looking back now, I realize my first paycheck was never really about money. It was the beginning of understanding responsibility, understanding community, understanding gratitude. Every deduction I once questioned was quietly supporting roads I drove on, schools children attended, healthcare programs, and a system much larger than myself. More importantly, every paycheck represented another month of growth, another month of better English, another month of stronger relationships, another month closer to building the life I had once only imagined. I still didn't know exactly what the future would bring, but one thing had become wonderfully clear. The next paycheck would no longer belong only to me, because somewhere deep inside my heart, I had already started imagining a future where every dream, every challenge, and every dollar would be shared with the woman who had unknowingly changed everything. Building our home. A house can be purchased with money, but a home is built one ordinary day at a time. Looking back, I don't remember the expensive moments because there weren't many. I remember folding laundry together on quiet Sunday afternoons. I remember laughing while trying to assemble cheap furniture with confusing instructions. I remember sharing simple dinners after long work days and realizing that happiness had quietly entered my life without making a grand announcement. America was no longer just the country where I worked. It had become the place where our future was beginning to take shape. Nearly a year had passed since I received my first paycheck. Life felt very different. My English had improved naturally. I no longer rehearsed every sentence before speaking. Sometimes I even caught myself dreaming in English. That surprised me more than anything else. Language experts often describe dreaming in a new language as a sign that the brain has begun processing information more automatically. Whether that was scientifically true for everyone or not, it certainly felt true for me. One Saturday afternoon, Emily and I visited a small apartment that had just become available. It wasn't large. It wasn't luxurious. The kitchen was tiny. The bedroom barely fit a queen-size bed. The carpet had clearly seen better days. But sunlight poured through the living room window. There was a little balcony overlooking a quiet neighborhood. Birds rested on nearby trees. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk. Emily smiled before saying a single word. I like it. I smiled too.
So do I.
Neither of us needed anything bigger. We didn't dream about luxury. We dreamed about peace. A week later, we signed the lease. Walking into the empty apartment with our keys felt strangely emotional. There was almost nothing inside. Just white walls.
Bara floors.
A few echoing rooms.
Still, it already felt different.
This is our place, Emily whispered. Our place. Those two words meant more than I could explain. The following weekends became adventures. Not expensive adventures. Simple ones. We visited thrift stores looking for affordable furniture. We compared prices at discount stores. We searched online for used bookshelves and dining chairs. Every dollar mattered. Every purchase required discussion. Sometimes we disagreed. Emily preferred modern furniture. I liked warm wooden designs. She wanted bright colors. I preferred neutral tones. Fortunately, we both agreed on one important rule. No argument was more important than our relationship. That simple decision saved us many unnecessary fights. Psychologists often explain that successful couples focus less on winning arguments and more on solving problems together. As I look back now, that mindset quietly became one of the strongest foundations of our marriage. One rainy evening, we spent nearly 3 hours trying to build a simple coffee table. The instruction manual seemed written in another language. Even though it was English, we accidentally attached one leg backward, then another. At one point, Emily looked at the crooked table and burst into laughter. I think the table is judging us. I laughed so hard that I nearly dropped the screwdriver. Eventually we finished. It wasn't perfect. One corner sat slightly higher than the others. Whenever someone placed a coffee mug on it, the mug gently slid toward the center. Instead of replacing it, we kept it for years. It reminded us that imperfect things often carry the best memories. As our apartment slowly filled with furniture, it also filled with traditions. Friday evenings became homemade pizza night. Saturday mornings started with pancakes and coffee. Sunday afternoons were reserved for grocery shopping and meal preparation for the coming week. Those routines seemed ordinary. But ordinary routines quietly create extraordinary lives. Money remained an important topic. We still followed our monthly budget carefully. Sometimes unexpected expenses appeared. A car repair, medical bills, a broken refrigerator. Life has a funny way of testing every financial plan. Instead of blaming each other, We sat down with a notebook and searched for solutions together. Each challenge made us a little stronger. Each solution made us trust each other a little more. One evening, while organizing old paperwork, I found my very first American paycheck. The same paycheck that had once confused me so much. I showed it to Emily. "Do you remember this?" She smiled immediately. The famous paycheck. "I almost thought my employer forgot to pay me." She laughed. "And now?" I looked at the paper carefully. "Now I think it was one of the best lessons I ever received." She nodded. Sometimes life teaches us with surprises instead of explanations. That sentence stayed in my mind for days. Life rarely explains itself first. Usually, understanding comes much later. Around that time, my manager called me into his office. For a brief moment, I worried I had done something wrong. Instead, he smiled. "You've been doing excellent work." My heart started beating faster. "We'd like to offer you a promotion." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The position came with more responsibility, a slightly higher salary, better benefits. Most importantly, it showed that my efforts had been noticed. Months earlier, I had struggled to understand everyday conversations. Now I was being trusted with training new employees. Walking back to my workstation, I realized how far I had come. Not because my English had become perfect. It hadn't. I still made mistakes. I still searched for words sometimes. The difference was confidence. I no longer allowed fear to make decisions for me. That evening, Emily met me outside work. She immediately noticed the smile on my face. "What happened?" "I have good news." Her eyes grew wide. "You got promoted?" I laughed. "How did you know?" That smile gave it away. We celebrated with 2 inexpensive hamburgers from our favorite neighborhood restaurant. Nothing fancy. No expensive gifts. Just gratitude. As we sat together watching cars pass outside the restaurant window, Emily quietly reached across the table. "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words felt more valuable than the raise itself. Research consistently shows that emotional support from a partner strengthens resilience during life's challenges and increases long-term relationship satisfaction. Sitting there beside Emily, I didn't need statistics to understand that truth. Weeks later, during a peaceful evening walk through our neighborhood, we passed a small playground where children were laughing as their parents watched nearby. Emily slowed her steps. She smiled gently. "I wonder." She looked at me. "What our children might be like someday." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Children. It was the first time either of us had spoken that dream out loud. I smiled without saying anything, because deep inside, I had already begun imagining the same future. Neither of us knew that life was about to answer that quiet dream much sooner than we ever expected. Family changes everything. Life rarely announces its biggest miracles with fireworks. More often, they arrive in complete silence, hidden inside an ordinary phone call, a quiet smile, or a sentence so simple that it takes a few seconds before your heart truly understands what it means. Looking back now, I can still remember every tiny detail of that evening. The soft light in our apartment. The smell of dinner still floating through the kitchen. The gentle rain tapping against the living room window. I had no idea that in just a few moments, everything I believed about work, money, success, and even time itself was about to change forever. Emily seemed unusually quiet that day. Normally, she talked about work while preparing dinner. That evening, she smiled more than she spoke. I noticed it immediately. "Everything okay?" She nodded. "Yes." But her smile grew even bigger. I laughed. "You're hiding something." She walked into the bedroom without answering. A few seconds later, she returned holding a very small white box. At first, I didn't understand. She placed it gently into my hands. Open it. Inside was a tiny pair of baby socks. For a moment, I simply stared. My brain needed time to catch up. Then I looked at Emily. Her eyes were already filled with happy tears. We're going to have a baby. The room became completely silent. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think. I hugged her as tightly as I could. Neither of us cared that dinner was getting cold. Nothing else mattered. That single sentence changed everything. I wasn't only building a career anymore. I wasn't only learning English anymore. I wasn't only adapting to American life anymore. I was becoming a father. That word felt both exciting and terrifying. Father. For the next several weeks, every ordinary day suddenly carried new meaning. When I went to work, I wasn't earning money just for myself. I was earning money for my growing family. When I studied English in the evening, I wasn't doing it only for career opportunities. I wanted to become the kind of father who could confidently speak with teachers, doctors, neighbors, and someday help with homework. Without realizing it, my motivation completely changed. Psychologists often explain that people become more persistent when their goals are connected to someone they deeply love rather than themselves. Alone. Looking back, I finally understood why learning English suddenly felt easier. My reason had become much bigger than fear. Emily's pregnancy brought many new experiences. Doctor appointments, ultrasound visits, parenting books, baby stores, names. So many names. We spent entire evenings discussing possibilities. What about Noah? I like it. What about Olivia if it's a girl? Beautiful. Sometimes we changed our minds 3 times in one evening. Sometimes we laughed because choosing a baby name somehow felt harder than choosing an apartment. Our little home slowly began changing too. The spare corner of the bedroom became a nursery. Tiny clothes appeared inside drawers. A rocking chair stood near the window. Soft blankets replaced decorative pillows. The apartment suddenly looked different. Warmer. Gentler. Full of expectation. One Saturday morning we visited a baby store. I had never seen so many tiny shoes in my life. Emily picked up a miniature jacket. Look how small this is. I held it in my hands and smiled. I can't believe someone will actually wear this. She laughed. You'll be saying that about everything. She was right. Everything suddenly seemed unbelievably small. Tiny socks, tiny hats, tiny bottles, tiny fingers, tiny future dreams waiting quietly to arrive. Money also became more important than ever. Children bring incredible joy. They also bring new responsibilities. Emily and I carefully reviewed our monthly budget again. Daycare, health insurance, baby supplies, savings, emergency expenses. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, we felt prepared. The budgeting habits we had built over the previous year suddenly became incredibly valuable. Financial planners often say that preparing before major life changes reduces stress significantly. We experienced that firsthand. Planning didn't eliminate uncertainty, but it gave us confidence. At work, my coworkers noticed I smiled much more than usual. Michael walked over one afternoon. Okay, he laughed. You've been smiling all week. Something good happened? I couldn't keep the secret any longer. I'm going to be a dad. His face immediately lit up. He shook my hand, then pulled me into a hug. Congratulations. Soon everyone seemed to know. People shared advice, stories, funny memories, warnings about sleepless nights. One coworker laughed. Sleep while you still can. Everyone else nodded. Apparently, that was universal parenting advice. Meanwhile, my English continued improving naturally. This time, through completely different conversations. Prenatal appointments introduced new vocabulary. Heartbeat, ultrasound, nutrition, appointment,
due date, crib,
stroller. Instead of memorizing these words from a textbook, I learned them because they mattered to my real life. Research consistently shows that emotional relevance strengthens vocabulary retention. Every new word carried a personal memory, making it almost impossible to forget. As Emily's pregnancy progressed, I noticed another beautiful part of American culture. Complete strangers often smiled when they noticed her growing baby bump. Older women shared encouraging words. Cashiers congratulated us. Neighbors asked how she was feeling. Kindness appeared in unexpected places. One snowy afternoon, an elderly man offered Emily his seat on the bus before she even asked. She thanked him warmly. As we stepped off the bus later, she quietly said, "Little moments like that restore my faith in people." I agreed. Kindness costs nothing, yet its value is impossible to measure. One evening we attended a childbirth preparation class. I felt completely out of place. There were couples everywhere. Some looked confident. Others looked just as nervous as we were. The instructor asked everyone to introduce themselves. Months earlier, speaking English in front of strangers would have terrified me. This time I stood up calmly. "My name is Daniel. This is my wife, Emily. We're expecting our first baby." The words came naturally.
no rehearsing, no panic, no translating.
As I sat back down, I realized something incredible. English had quietly become part of who I was. Not because I had mastered every grammar rule, but because I had lived through thousands of real conversations. Language was no longer something I studied. It was simply the way I shared my life. As our baby's due date grew closer, excitement filled every room of our apartment. The crib stood ready. The tiny clothes were neatly folded. The hospital bag waited by the front door. Every evening before going to bed, I gently placed my hand on Emily's growing belly. Sometimes our baby kicked. Every tiny movement made us laugh. Neither of us knew whether our child would inherit my smile or Emily's eyes. But we both hoped for one thing above everything else, that our child would grow up surrounded by love. What we didn't know was that the most unforgettable night of our lives was much closer than we imagined. And nothing, not books, classes, or advice, could truly prepare us for the moment we would finally hear our baby's very first cry. Hard days never last. The happiest chapters of life are not free from difficult days. In fact, the moments that shape us most often arrive when we feel tired, uncertain, and completely unprepared. Becoming parents was the greatest blessing we had ever received, but it also introduced challenges that no book, no class, and no friendly advice could fully explain. Looking back, I don't remember those months because they were easy. I remember them because they proved that love becomes strongest when life is at its hardest. Our son arrived on a cold spring morning. The sun had just begun rising when we reached the hospital. Everything happened so quickly. Doctors moved calmly through the room. Nurses smiled with reassuring confidence. Machines quietly beeped in the background. I held Emily's hand the entire time. Sometimes she squeezed it so tightly that I forgot about my own fear. Hours seemed to pass like minutes. Then suddenly, I heard it. A tiny cry.
Soft.
Beautiful. Completely unforgettable. The room instantly changed. Doctors smiled. Nurses congratulated us. Emily looked exhausted, but happier than I had ever seen her. The nurse carefully placed our baby into Emily's arms. I looked at the tiny face staring back at us. 10 little fingers. 10 little toes. The smallest nose I had ever seen. He wrapped one tiny hand around my finger. At that exact moment, nothing else in the world mattered. Not work. Not money. Not stress. Not even sleep. Only him. Only us. We named him Noah. The drive home from the hospital felt different from every drive before it. I drove slower than usual. Every small bump in the road felt enormous. Emily laughed. You know he's safely buckled in, right? I know. I just want everything to be perfect. She smiled. It already is. The first week at home felt magical.
And exhausting.
Noah slept, then cried, then ate, then slept again. Day and night slowly lost their meaning. Sometimes I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning without knowing what day it was. Coffee became my best friend. Emily laughed one morning. I think we're officially parents now. How do you know? We're both excited about getting 4 hours of sleep. We laughed together. It felt good to laugh, because some days were harder than we expected. There were moments when Noah cried for what seemed like hours. Moments when Emily felt overwhelmed. Moments when I questioned whether I was doing enough. I still worked full-time. Emily stayed home during maternity leave. Every evening I hurried home, eager to help in any way I could. Sometimes helping simply meant holding Noah while Emily took a 20-minute nap. Sometimes it meant washing bottles, folding tiny clothes, cooking dinner, or quietly sitting beside Emily after a difficult day. Those ordinary moments slowly became expressions of love. Psychologists often explain that strong families are built through consistent small acts of support rather than occasional grand gestures. Looking back, I believe that was exactly what happened in our home. Money became tighter than before. Diapers,
Formula.
doctor visits, baby supplies. Every month seemed to introduce another unexpected expense. One evening I sat quietly reviewing our budget. Emily noticed. Worried. A little.
She sat beside me.
We've handled every challenge so far. She was right. We had. Still, I wanted to provide more. A few weeks later, my manager announced that overtime hours were available. Without hesitation, I volunteered. The extra income would help. But overtime came with a price. Less sleep, less free time, more exhaustion. For several months, my daily routine became almost automatic. Wake up before sunrise. Work all day. Sometimes stay for overtime. Drive home. Help with Noah. Eat dinner. Practice English for 20 minutes before bed.
Sleep. Repeat.
Some evenings I felt too tired to study. The couch looked far more inviting than my notebook. Then I would hear Noah making little sounds from his crib. I remembered why I had started this journey. Not to become perfect. To create better opportunities for my family. That simple reminder helped me open my English book every single time. Research on habit formation suggests that attaching a new habit to a meaningful purpose dramatically increases consistency over time. I smiled when I later learned that because it perfectly described my own experience. Motivation fades. Purpose stays. My English practice also changed again. Instead of reading business articles, I began reading children's books aloud. At first, I thought I was practicing for Noah. Soon I realized I was practicing for myself too. The simple vocabulary, the clear pronunciation, the short sentences. Everything fit perfectly with slow English learning. Emily often listened from the kitchen while preparing dinner. One evening she smiled and said, "You know." "What?" "You're becoming a really good storyteller." I laughed. "My audience can't even talk yet." She looked toward Noah, who was staring curiously at the colorful pictures. "Oh, I think he's listening." Maybe she was right. Every night became a little tradition. One children's book, one lullaby, one goodnight kiss, one quiet promise to keep trying tomorrow. Then something unexpected happened. Several months later, another new employee joined our workplace. He had recently arrived in America. His English reminded me of my own during those first difficult weeks. He hesitated before speaking. He apologized for every mistake. He looked nervous almost all the time. One afternoon, he quietly asked, "Can you help me understand my paycheck?" I smiled immediately. The memory came rushing back. The confusion, the deductions, the questions. I sat beside him during lunch. Slowly, patiently, I explained each line. Gross pay, net pay, federal tax, Social Security, Medicare, exactly as Michael had once explained them to me. When we finished, he smiled with visible relief. "Thank you." I thought I was the only one. I smiled. So did I. Walking back to work, I realized something beautiful. Life had quietly come full circle. Someone had once guided me. Now, I was guiding someone else. Perhaps that is one of the greatest signs of real growth, not when you stop needing help, but when you become able to offer it. That evening I shared the story with Emily. She smiled proudly. "You've come a long way." I guess I have. You didn't just learn English. You learned how to help people feel less alone.
Her words stayed with me.
Language isn't only about vocabulary. It's about making another person feel understood. Months passed. Noah began smiling more, then rolling over, then crawling across the living room floor at surprising speed. Every new milestone felt like a celebration. Our apartment echoed with laughter far more often than silence now. Life still wasn't easy. Some bills were still stressful. Some nights were still sleepless. Some days were still exhausting. But something had changed inside me. I no longer measured success by the size of my paycheck. I measured it by the smiles waiting for me when I opened the front door. And without realizing it, another unexpected opportunity was already approaching, one that would challenge my English, transform my career, and prove that all those small daily efforts had been preparing me for something much bigger than I had ever imagined. Small progress, big confidence. Success rarely arrives with loud applause. More often, it whispers through tiny improvements that almost seem too small to notice. One clear conversation. One new word remembered without effort. One difficult situation that suddenly feels easy because you have already faced something even harder. Looking back, I never experienced one magical day when my English became fluent. Instead, thousands of ordinary moments quietly built the confidence I had been searching for since the day I first arrived in America. By the time Noah celebrated his first birthday, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings were still busy. Work remained demanding. Our budget still required attention. But the constant feeling of uncertainty had almost disappeared. I no longer woke up wondering whether I belonged in America. Instead, I wondered what new opportunity might come next. That change surprised me. "We're introducing a new training program," he announced. "We need someone to help new employees during their first few weeks." Several coworkers looked around the room. Then my manager looked directly at me. "Daniel, I think you'd be perfect." For a second, I honestly thought he was speaking to someone else.
Me?
The man who had once been afraid to order coffee? The employee who had stared at his first paycheck in complete confusion? The newcomer who used to rehearse every English sentence before speaking? I smiled nervously. I'd be happy to help. Walking back to my workstation, I felt both excited and terrified. Training new employees meant speaking clearly, answering questions, explaining procedures, helping people from different backgrounds. Months earlier, I would have declined immediately. Now I saw it differently. Every challenge was another opportunity to grow. The first training session arrived faster than expected. 3 new employees joined our team. One came from Mexico, another from South Korea. The third had recently moved from Brazil. As I introduced myself, I noticed something interesting. They looked exactly the way I had looked during my first week. Curious, hopeful, nervous. I smiled. Don't worry. I remember being new too. The tension in the room immediately disappeared. Sometimes people don't need perfect instructions. They simply need someone who understands how they feel. That realization completely changed the way I communicated. Instead of trying to sound impressive, I focused on being helpful. Instead of speaking quickly, I slowed down. Instead of using complicated vocabulary, I chose simple words. Ironically, my English became stronger the moment I stopped trying to prove how good it was. Communication researchers often emphasize that clear language builds trust more effectively than complex language. I experience that truth every single day while training new employees. One afternoon, my manager stopped beside my workstation. I've been getting good feedback. I looked surprised. Really? He nodded. People say you explain things clearly. That compliment meant more to me than he probably realized. Years earlier, I had worried that my accent would always hold me back. Now people appreciated the way I communicated, not because I sounded exactly like a native speaker, because they understood me. Confidence slowly changes the way other people see you. It also changes the way you see yourself. Around the same time, Emily returned to work after spending many months at home with Noah. Our schedules became more complicated. Daycare drop-offs, pickups, meal planning, laundry, doctor appointments. Every hour seemed carefully planned. At first, we worried the busy routine would create stress. Instead, something unexpected happened. We became an even better team. Some mornings I prepared breakfast while Emily packed Noah's lunch. Other mornings she handled breakfast while I got Noah dressed. Nobody kept score. Nobody counted who had done more. We simply helped wherever help was needed. Relationship experts often describe this as shared responsibility, one of the strongest predictors of long-term relationship satisfaction. Looking back, I believe they are absolutely right. One evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, Emily looked through an old photo album. There was a picture of me during my first month in America. I barely recognized myself. My smile looked uncertain. My shoulders seemed tense. Even my eyes appeared tired. Emily placed that photo beside a recent one. The difference was remarkable. "You've changed," she said softly. "I've gotten older." She laughed. "Not older. Stronger." I looked carefully at both pictures. She was right. The biggest difference wasn't my clothes, or my hairstyle, or even my English. It was confidence. The kind that cannot be purchased. The kind that only grows through experience. That night, I found my old notebook from my first year in America. Inside were dozens of English words I had once struggled to remember. Forecast, deduction, appointment, neighborhood, confidence, gratitude. I smiled as I turned each page. Words that once seemed difficult had become part of my daily life. Then I noticed a sentence I had written beneath my very first paycheck. Every deduction teaches me something. Every challenge makes me stronger. I quietly read it again. For the first time, I fully believed it. Not because life had become easier. Because every challenge had truly taught me something valuable. The next weekend, Emily suggested taking Noah to a community festival downtown. Families filled the streets. Children played games. Local musicians performed on a small outdoor stage. Food trucks lined both sides of the park. The atmosphere felt joyful. While standing in line for lemonade, I heard someone call my name. "Daniel." I turned around. It was Michael, the coworker who had explained my first paycheck months earlier. He smiled the moment he saw Noah sitting on my shoulders. I remember, when you thought payroll had forgotten to pay you. We both laughed. I remember that too. He looked at my family. You've built a wonderful life. For a second, I didn't know how to respond. Then I looked at Emily, at Noah, at the festival around us, at the life we had slowly created together. Yes, I answered quietly. I really have. As we walked home that evening beneath the golden light of the setting sun, I realized that confidence doesn't arrive all at once. It grows every time you choose to continue instead of quitting. Every conversation, every mistake, every paycheck, every ordinary day. None of those moments seemed extraordinary by themselves. Together, they had completely transformed my life. Still, another lesson was waiting just ahead, one that would make me look back at my very first paycheck with even deeper appreciation and remind me that the true value of every dollar can never be measured by numbers alone. Appreciating every dollar. Looking back, I sometimes smile at the person I used to be. I thought success meant earning a bigger paycheck. I believed happiness would arrive the moment more money appeared in my bank account. Years later, I discovered something very different. Money certainly makes life easier, but gratitude makes life richer. And strangely enough, the lesson began with the paycheck that had once disappointed me the most. Another year passed almost without me noticing. Noah was no longer a baby. He had learned to walk. His tiny footsteps echoed through our apartment every morning. Sometimes he laughed while running from one room to another. Sometimes he proudly carried his favorite stuffed bear everywhere he went. The apartment that once felt quiet now felt wonderfully alive. Emily often laughed. I missed the silence. Then Noah would hug her leg. She would smile immediately. Actually, maybe I don't. Life was busier than ever. Work continued to go well. I had settled into my new role helping train new employees. Several people I had mentored had already become close friends. Watching them grow reminded me of my own journey. Every newcomer carried a story. Every accent reflected another dream. Every first paycheck carried another lesson. One Friday afternoon, I received a notification from the payroll system. My salary had increased again after my annual performance review. Years earlier, I would have focused only on the number. This time, I noticed something else first. The deductions had also increased. Oddly enough, I smiled. A coworker sitting nearby noticed. You must have gotten good news. I did. Bigger paycheck. Yes. He laughed. Then why are you smiling at the taxes? I looked down at the screen again. Because they remind me how far I've come. He looked slightly confused. So I told him the story. My first paycheck. The confusion. Michael's explanation. Everything. When I finished, he smiled. I've never thought about it that way. Neither had I. Not until life slowly changed my perspective. Research in positive psychology consistently suggests that gratitude changes the way people experience everyday life. The circumstances may remain similar, but appreciation transforms ordinary moments into meaningful ones. Looking back, I realized that gratitude had quietly become one of the greatest gifts America had given me. That weekend, Emily and I decided to organize old boxes stored in our apartment closet. Inside one box were dozens of forgotten memories. Our apartment lease, coffee shop receipts, hospital bracelets from Noah's birth, old photographs, birthday cards. Then, folded neatly inside a small envelope, I found it. My very first American paycheck. The paper looked slightly worn. The ink had faded just a little. I held it carefully. Emily smiled the moment she saw it. You still kept it. I could never throw it away. Noah looked up curiously.
Daddy, what's that?
I smiled.
This?
I gently unfolded the paper. This is one of the most important pieces of paper I've ever owned. He looked confused. It doesn't look important. Emily laughed softly. He'll understand someday. I hoped she was right. I carefully explained to Noah, using words simple enough for a young child to understand. This was the first money Daddy earned after moving to America. He looked at the paper again. Did it make you rich? I couldn't help laughing.
No.
It made me thankful. Children have a wonderful way of asking questions that adults rarely consider. His question stayed with me long after the conversation ended. What had truly made me feel rich? It wasn't the paycheck. It wasn't the promotion. It wasn't even owning our apartment later on. Real wealth had appeared much more quietly. Dinner around the table. Family walks. Bedtime stories. Sunday pancakes. Laughter filling the living room. Those moments had no price tag. Yet they became the most valuable parts of my life. A few weeks later, our family visited a community volunteer event organized by our neighborhood. People packed food boxes for families experiencing financial hardship. Without hesitation, Emily signed us up. Noah eagerly carried small bags from one table to another. He treated the whole event like an exciting adventure. As I packed food into boxes, I remembered my first months in America. The uncertainty, the budgeting, counting every dollar, wondering whether I could afford unexpected expenses. Although our situation had improved, I hadn't forgotten those feelings. Helping others reminded me that many people were still beginning journeys similar to mine. Psychologists often explain that helping others strengthens personal well-being and creates a deeper sense of purpose. Standing there beside my family, I understood exactly why. On the drive home, Noah sat quietly in the back seat. Finally, he asked, "Why were we giving people food?" Emily smiled. "Because sometimes people need help." He thought for a moment. Like when someone helped Daddy? Neither of us answered immediately. Then I smiled. Exactly like that. His simple observation nearly brought tears to my eyes. Children often understand life's biggest lessons with surprising clarity. Several months later, another milestone arrived. Emily and I finally saved enough money for a down payment on a small house. Nothing extravagant. 3 bedrooms. A little backyard. A maple tree standing proudly near the front porch. The day we received the keys, I stood quietly in the empty living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Noah ran from room to room laughing. Emily wrapped her arms around me. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. I was just thinking.
About what?
My first paycheck. She laughed gently. Everything always comes back to that paycheck. I smiled, because that's where this story really began. Without that first job, there would have been no first paycheck. Without the confusion over deductions, I might never have asked questions. Without learning English through everyday life, I might never have built enough confidence. Without that confidence, I might never have spoken to Emily beneath the maple tree. Without Emily, there would be no Noah, no family dinners, no bedtime stories, no little house with a maple tree outside. Sometimes the smallest moments quietly change everything. As I looked around our new home, I realized that every dollar I had earned represented far more than money. It represented early mornings, long work days,
Courage.
patience,
Growth. Love.
and countless ordinary conversations spoken in imperfect but heartfelt English. Standing there beside my family, I finally understood something I wished I had known years earlier. The greatest value of a paycheck is never the amount printed at the bottom. It's the life you slowly build because you chose not to give up. And although our journey already felt complete in many ways, another beautiful chapter was just beginning. A chapter where the lessons we had learned would be passed on to the people we loved most. A better future together. The most meaningful success is not measured by the job title on your business card or the balance in your bank account. It is measured by the people waiting for you at home, the values you pass on to your children, and the quiet realization that your difficult days have become someone else's source of hope. Years after stepping onto American soil with one suitcase and uncertain English, I finally understood that my greatest achievement was never building a career. It was building a family that could dream without fear. Our new house quickly became more than a place to live. It became a place where memories quietly gathered. The maple tree in the front yard changed with every season. Fresh green leaves appeared in spring. Deep shade covered the yard during summer. Golden colors painted the branches in autumn. Snow rested gently on every limb during winter. Noah loved every season. In spring, he chased butterflies. In summer, he played with the garden hose until everyone became soaked. In autumn, he jumped into piles of leaves. In winter, he built snowmen that leaned a little to one side but somehow looked perfect anyway. Watching him grow reminded me how quickly time moves. It felt like only yesterday I had been holding him for the first time at the hospital. Now he asked endless questions about the world. Daddy, why is the sky blue? Daddy, why do birds fly? Daddy, why do we pay taxes? That last question made Emily laugh so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. She looked at me. I think that's your question. I smiled. Come here, buddy. Noah climbed onto the sofa beside me. I spoke slowly, choosing simple words. When people work, they earn money. He nodded seriously. Some of that money helps build roads.
He nodded again.
It helps schools. Another nod. It helps firefighters, police officers, hospitals, and many other services that help everyone. He thought carefully. So, we help each other? I smiled.
Exactly.
Children have an incredible ability to simplify complicated ideas. His answer captured everything I had struggled to understand during my first months in America. We help each other. That simple sentence stayed with me for days. At work, another opportunity appeared. The company asked me to help create a welcome program for international employees. Instead of simply explaining workplace rules, I suggested something different. Let's teach practical English through everyday situations. Reading a paycheck, talking with coworkers, scheduling doctor appointments, shopping for groceries, calling customer service, understanding simple American customs. My manager loved the idea. We should have done this years ago, he said. For several weeks, I worked with a small team to create beginner-friendly materials. Everything was written in clear, slow English. Short sentences. Real conversations. Useful vocabulary. Nothing complicated. Watching new employees relax as they realized they could actually understand the material became incredibly rewarding. Research in adult education consistently shows that learners progress faster when lessons connect directly to real-life experiences. Every smiling face in those training sessions reminded me that I had once been sitting exactly where they were. One afternoon, after finishing a workshop, a young employee quietly approached me. I almost quit during my first week. I looked at him. What changed? He smiled. I heard your story.
He paused.
If you could do it, maybe I can too. For a moment, I couldn't speak. His words reminded me why stories matter. Facts teach information. Stories give people courage. That evening, I shared the conversation with Emily while we prepared dinner together. She smiled. I've always believed your story would help people. I didn't think it was special. She gently squeezed my hand. The best stories rarely belong to extraordinary people. They belong to ordinary people who refuse to give up. Her words stayed with me long after dinner ended. Meanwhile, Noah had started elementary school. His first day reminded me of my own first day in America. A new place, new faces, new experiences. He held my hand tightly as we walked toward the classroom.
Daddy.
Yes. What if nobody talks to me? I knelt beside him. I used to worry about that too. You did. Every single day. What happened? I smiled. I smiled first. He thought for a moment. Then he smiled back. I can do that. Watching him walk confidently into his classroom filled me with quiet pride. Not because he wasn't afraid. Because he chose courage even while feeling afraid. That lesson applies to children. It also applies to adults learning English. Confidence is rarely the beginning of action. More often, confidence is the result of taking action despite uncertainty. Our evenings became one of my favorite parts of the day. Dinner together, homework, bedtime stories. Sometimes Noah asked me to read in English. Sometimes he wanted stories in my native language. We did both. Growing up with two languages became completely natural for him. One evening he looked at me after I finished reading. Daddy. Yes, I like your English. I laughed. Really? He nodded. It sounds like you. That simple compliment touched me deeply. For years I had worried about sounding different. Now my own son reminded me that sounding like myself was enough. Language is not about hiding who you are. It is about sharing who you are. As another year passed, Emily and I celebrated our wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at the same little cafe where we had shared our first coffee together. The furniture had changed. The menu looked different. Even the coffee cups were new. But one thing remained exactly the same. The warmth we felt sitting across from each other. Emily smiled. Remember how nervous you were? I still get nervous. She laughed. Not like that. We both smiled. Life had certainly changed. Yet somehow we were still those two people enjoying simple conversations over coffee. Driving home that evening, we passed the small park where loose papers had once blown across the grass. The old maple tree was still standing. The familiar bench was still there. I parked the car. We walked over quietly. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. Finally, Emily smiled. Funny how one windy afternoon changed everything. I nodded. If those papers hadn't blown away. She finished my sentence. We might never have met. Sometimes destiny arrives disguised as an ordinary inconvenience. Looking at that old bench, I realized our story had never really been about money, or taxes, or even learning English. It had always been about choosing hope over fear, one ordinary day after another. Still, one final lesson remained, a lesson that would bring every chapter of this journey together and remind me why that very first paycheck would always hold a special place in my heart. The paycheck that changed me. Every journey has a beginning that seems ordinary at the time. Mine began with a paycheck that looked smaller than I expected. Back then, I thought the story was about taxes, deductions, and missing money. Today, standing in the life that Emily and I built together, I know that first paycheck was never the real story. It was simply the first page of a much bigger one, a story about courage, learning, family, gratitude, and discovering that the greatest rewards in life cannot be counted with numbers. Several years have passed since my first day in America. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like another lifetime. Life continues to move forward, just as it always does. Noah is taller now. He rides his bicycle through our neighborhood with confidence. His laughter still fills the house. Emily still smiles every morning before her first cup of coffee. I still leave for work early. Some habits never change. And honestly, I hope they never do. One quiet Saturday morning, while cleaning the bookshelf in my home office, I found the small notebook I had carried during my first year in the United States. Its cover was slightly worn. Several pages had folded corners. Inside were hundreds of English words written in careful handwriting. Some pages contained short conversations. Others held reminders I had written to encourage myself. Keep speaking. Don't fear mistakes. One new word today. Then I reached the page with my first paycheck, carefully taped inside exactly where I had placed it years ago. Beneath it was the sentence I had written on that unforgettable evening. Every deduction teaches me something. Every challenge makes me stronger. I smiled. If I could travel back in time, I would find the younger version of myself sitting alone at that tiny kitchen table, staring at the paycheck with confused eyes. I would sit beside him. I wouldn't spoil the future. I wouldn't tell him about Emily. I wouldn't tell him about Noah. I wouldn't tell him about promotions, our home, or the beautiful life waiting ahead. I would simply say, don't give up. Keep learning. Keep asking questions. Keep speaking English. Everything will make sense one day. Life rarely gives us explanations before the lesson. Usually, understanding arrives years later. That morning, Noah walked into my office carrying one of his school projects. Dad, can you help me? Of course. I expected him to choose a famous athlete, a scientist, maybe an astronaut. Instead, I saw my own name written at the top of the page. I looked at him. You picked me? He nodded. You're my hero. I laughed softly. I'm just your dad. He smiled. That's why. For a moment, I couldn't find any words. Every difficult day, every overtime shift, every English lesson, every confusing paycheck, every sacrifice suddenly felt worthwhile. Success isn't always hearing applause from the world. Sometimes it's hearing your child quietly say, I'm proud of you. No award could ever mean more. That evening, our family gathered in the backyard. The maple tree swayed gently in the evening breeze. Birds sang from nearby branches. The sunset painted the sky with soft shades of orange and gold. Emily brought out lemonade. Noah chased bubbles across the grass. I sat quietly, watching them both. Gratitude filled my heart. Not because life had become perfect. It hadn't. There were still unexpected bills, busy schedules, long work days, challenges that appeared without warning, but we faced them together. And somehow, together always felt enough. Psychologists often describe gratitude as one of the strongest predictors of long-term happiness. They explain that grateful people tend to notice abundance rather than focusing only on what is missing. Looking around my backyard that evening, I realized I wasn't thinking about what I still wanted. I was appreciating everything I already had. Later that night, Noah climbed onto my lap with one final question.
Dad.
Yes, when I grow up, I want my first paycheck. I laughed. I hope you do. He looked curious. Will it change my life too? I thought carefully before answering. The paycheck won't. He looked confused. What will? The person you become while earning it. He smiled. I'll remember that. I believe he will. As the stars slowly appeared above our home, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought me here. A new country, a new language, a confusing paycheck, a kind coworker, a windy afternoon in the park, a woman carrying scattered papers, a simple cup of coffee, a wedding, a baby, a family, a home. Thousands of ordinary conversations spoken in slow, imperfect English. Each moment seemed small when it happened. Together, they created an extraordinary life. If you're listening to my story today while learning English, I want you to remember something. You don't need perfect grammar to build meaningful friendships. You don't need a perfect accent to create a successful career. You don't need perfect confidence before taking your first step. Progress is built one conversation at a time, one mistake at a time, one lesson at a time, one ordinary day at a time. Maybe you're struggling to understand English today. Maybe you're worried about making mistakes. Maybe you're beginning a completely new chapter of your own life. If that's true, I hope my journey reminds you that every expert was once a beginner. Every confident speaker once searched for simple words. Every successful family once started with a single dream. And every unforgettable story begins with one small decision to keep moving forward. The paycheck that once made me question everything eventually became the reminder that I carry with me every single day. Money helped me build a life. Learning helped me build a future. Love helped me build a home. Gratitude helped me recognize how blessed I truly was. And that, more than any number printed on a paycheck, became the greatest reward America ever gave me. Life doesn't always pay you in dollars. Sometimes it pays you in wisdom, courage, love, and second chances. Those rewards are the ones that grow richer with every passing year. Before you leave today, remember this. Your English doesn't have to be perfect to change your life. One new word. One short conversation. One page. One small step. That's how every great journey begins. Years ago, I thought my first American paycheck was only about money. Today, I know it was really about becoming a stronger person. Every tax deduction taught responsibility. Every mistake taught confidence. Every challenge brought me closer to the life I once thought was impossible. Maybe you're watching this while feeling tired after work. Maybe you're learning English alone. Maybe you've made mistakes that make you want to quit. Please don't. Because one day, you'll look back and realize that the hardest chapter became the beginning of your best story. And who knows? Perhaps the English sentence you're practicing today will help you meet someone special tomorrow. Perhaps the paycheck you're worried about today will become the memory that makes you smile years from now. Perhaps this ordinary moment is quietly changing your entire future. So, keep listening, keep reading,
Keep speaking.
keep believing. Your story is still being written. If this video helped you relax, practice English, or simply gave you hope, please support the channel by liking this video, leaving a comment in English, even one simple sentence, and subscribing for more slow English stories, slow English reading practice, and inspiring real-life stories from America. Every week, we'll explore a brand new journey together, filled with simple English, meaningful life lessons, American culture, family, love, and unforgettable moments that will help you improve your listening, reading, speaking, and confidence naturally. Thank you for spending these moments with me. Until our next story,
Keep learning. Keep smiling.
and never stop believing that your next chapter could be the one that changes everything.